Yes, well, it's my turn. So what I want to share with you is like my experience in two legal processes. And I will try to have a perspective as a scientist and try to tell you like how I get involved in this kind of process. Is like what is the logic that I try to follow that can be like helpful. And all this illustrated in two cases, that the repeal of the long-term norm of PM10 and the environmental demand of Puchuncaví Ventanas that my colleagues are mentioned. So first is the repeal of PM10. This happened in 2013, kind of like following like the EPA rule that also repealed the PM10 in the United States. Like the idea was kind of like making the norms more efficient, and there was like when you talk to people the idea that coarse particles didn't do anything. And for this, like, it was very important in Chile because the coarse fraction of air pollution is very large in Chile because we have all these mining processes, all the processes that generate coarse particles are very important in Chile. And also we have many communities that they have like already installed PM10 plants, depollution plants. So they will be, if they repeal the PM10, they will get like with no decontamination plants. So I was contacted by environmental lawyers that start like asking me questions. So this is important. How you get involved in this is kind of like we have a friend in common that is Marcelo Mena, that you know, that was the Ministry of Environment, and he knew a lot of people. So that's the way that maybe if you know a lot of people, they will come and talk to you. But if you know other people, that maybe through them, they will come and start asking you. And so they approached me and they start asking me a lot of questions about the science of coarse particles and health effects. And they mentioned the idea of making a reclamation. What they say that the process was wrong. So trying to, repeal the repeal, So, and they mentioned that the way that we can do that is that maybe I can be an amicus curiae. So amicus curiae is not like a witness, it's kind of like a friend of the court that tries to illustrate the court about some scientific or legal important points. So then I did that, and so what I did, so I thought the most important thing was kind of like to understand what was at stake about the coarse particles. So what I did is just ask a lot of friends that you can see, Michal, Mike Jarrett, Mike Brower, and Bart Ostro, and they gave me some information that they say, especially Bart Ostro and Michal, they told me that it was a very bad idea to get rid of the PM10. And Bart Ostro gave me a lot of articles of the long-term effects of PM10 and coarse particles in children. And Michal sent me a very recent document of World Health Organization saying that PM10 can have like a lot of large effects. So I prepared a document. So it was suggested that if I present a report, the report has to be acknowledged by the sentence. So it was important. And first, what I did is kind of like review the logic of EPA. And what happened in EPA is that they, in the first place, decided to make a norm for PM2.5 and coarse particles separated. And then when you analyze the data and the kind of like the evidence for each one, what they say is that the evidence of PM10 was assigned for PM2.5 and not for coarse particles. So it's kind of like, okay, it's when you start like comparing, there was actually a lot of information of health effects of PM10. I also incorporated the evidence of this World Health Organization document that have a lot of articles about PM10 and the coarse particles. And then I tried to analyze the logic of why the government say that they have to repeal it. And I get to a key document that was the AGIES, that it was the one that kind of like initiated the process of the repeal. And this document was very simple, but very short, only have like 8 references. And basically the only thing that say is that EPA say that the coarse particles don't do anything. And then you go to see the reference, and the reference was wrong. So it's kind of like I pointed to the tribunal that the basis of how you do, why the government did it, it was like very weak. Then I was cited. I had to go there and I had to ask the question about the judges. There were like other scientists that asked a question. Some scientists for the appeal, kind of on the other side, saying that it was good. and well, was quite an experience. So what happened is that actually there was a sentence, and the sentence was in favor of the communities, saying that the repeal was wrong. And one of the comments that they say, it was actually what I mentioned at last, that the process of how they repealed the PM10 was not proper. And they mentioned some part of my amicus curiae. So the second thing that I got involved was the demand of environmental demand of Ventanas Puchuncaví that they mentioned. And this was a little bit different. So this was, I was approached, I mean, this was in 2016 that the lawyers started the demand. So at that time, they asked me to be witness, so be on one side. And they asked me to, the most difficult part, that is the point of causality of damage, and particular health damage in the region. And that's for our, as scientists, is very complex, but how you make causality from a scientific point of view and from a legal point of view. So there was a long time that nothing happened, so I thought that, oh, I don't have to do anything, until 2022 that they called me, okay, now it's for real. You have to be witness. And then I started like thinking what could be that approach. And this was key for me. So I got 2 books from Dr. Carl Krainer that is like directly of how you make this connection of science and the legal point of view. And they have, also they have like a lot of articles from Sander Greenland that maybe you know as an epidemiologist that has also participated in things like this. So I tried to get like kind of like inspiration from the way to face this problem from toxic torts. That is a little different in the United States, but to get the idea. So again, we prepare a report, so they have to acknowledge by the court. And basically, I try to just briefly try to do this point, try to understand what will be a causal effect of the complex, and trying to get an idea of this counterfactual of what would be if the complex was not there, you know, then try to think in a legal concept that is the general cause and the specific cause. General cause is saying PM2.5 is bad, and the specific cause is PM2.5 from this company did something wrong. That is more complicated. But for the company, almost all the general causes were known. I don't have to prove that. I mean, we know that they do bad things. Then another point that they did is what would be an evidence. And here I try to take the approach of the toxic torts is that thinking into a hypothesis, kind of like the company or the companies do something, and the other hypothesis is that the companies don't do anything. And try to think, and as of evidence, just taking any type of evidence that is available is kind of supporting the first hypothesis or the second hypothesis. It was the idea of the toxic torts. The other point was what to expect and what not to expect as evidence, because there were like in the air, there was a lot of kind of scientists that were saying that there was no evidence at all about health effects. And that's maybe could be like you were expecting some sort of evidence that actually you cannot produce. You cannot produce like a large cancer cohort in the region. So it's kind of like I make a lot of points of things that actually you cannot have. It's impossible to produce. So then I enter in the final part of the document that kind of like make a summary of the evidence, starting from emissions and 52 documents and papers about everything we know in the region, including some social science studies and how the communities felt that they're always polluted, that everybody's sick, and the story about the green man, that are people that work in the companies that when they died, they say that they opened and they were green inside, as that the polluted they were. Just to finish, this is one of the evidence that I thought that was most compelling for me, that these are the sediments that are in the region, kind of in a swamp, and each layer of the sediment tells you like what is the pollution of that year. And you can see that exactly in 1960 when the company started, you have like this deposition of heavy metals, and this deposition lasted until now. It's not that the new regulations kind of like get down to background levels, but is stay high and have been high all the time. And you can see that you have mercury, and the other thought that was very important, you have mercury, but actually mercury in one of the papers, they say that is not such a big issue. You know why? Because the soil is so polluted that it has no bacteria to produce the methyl mercury. So again, that was cited to the tribunal, that kind of the thing that you have to do if you get involved in that. So first I have to answer the question of the lawyer of the fishermen, then I have to answer the question of the lawyers of the 11 companies and the Ministry of Environment. Actually, they were much nicer. I thought it was going to be like a movie, that they were going to be like but actually, they were very nice. It's kind of like they're trying to pass the ball between them to say like, do you think it's my company or their company? It's kind of like that. And then I have to answer the question of the judges that were like, what was like the more complicated of all the set. And I think that's all. Yeah, well, the state now is that it was last year, and now we are expecting the sentence, and maybe she knows better when that will happen. And I think that's I have to say for today.
Thank you very much, Cata, Alejandra, and Pablo.